on. First of all, I welcome Chief Speaker of today's session for freedom, justice, equality, and fraternity. It focuses on knowledge and dialogue among concerned persons. And we invite people from different fields of life to share their knowledge and praxis to make this world in a very better sense. Let me also give a kind of brief introduction to our speaker, D.P. Roy ji. D.P. Roy is a deep seeker and a veteran congressman and was the member of the Legislative Assembly MLA from Alipur constituency of West Bengal and also a Rajya Sabha member. He is popularly known as Mithuda, and he's widely respected by all, irrespective of political lines. And he has immensely contributed for the development of people of his constituency, one of the remotest area of North Bengal. He is also known of his intellect, knowledge, and a sharp memory. An ardent Gandhian, he has authored a few good books and has contributed articles in both Bangla and English. So on behalf of Gandhian School of Democracy, we welcome him. Today, we are going to discuss a very important issue, that is democracy and pluralism. Being a country of diverse cultural background, pluralism is something which is very crucial for a smooth functioning of our democracy. And one of the most glorious aspects of India's pluralist cultural history is the treatment of that other states and people gave to the religious and minority groups that came to India as minority or refugee. And India is not only the biggest democracy in the world, but also it has the largest religious minority and diversity of its population in the world culture, and India has also slipped on democracy index. So it is now labeled as an electoral autocracy. So in this background, today we are going to discuss about the relationship between India's democracy and pluralism. So we will be joined by D.P. Roy ji. Meanwhile, we can initiate our...
Yes. I'm audible? Yes. Thank you very much. As regards the general question of democracy and pluralism, this is, of course, a question which is much debated on in our times, especially because we have to face, at least in certain countries, the question of the presence of multicultural states. This despite the fact that in the past we had, at least in Western Europe, states in which the cultures were relatively homogeneous, so to speak. Now we have a question, a condition in at least most Western countries of the presence of different groups. This is, of course, a new constellation, which is, of course, very interesting too, because these give an enrichment through the different cultures to the state, the condition of the country. On the other hand, of course, it poses problems because the question is how to adapt and how to make the constitution, which were thought for a different population, for a different composition of people, appropriate also now in which different cultures are present, different festivities, different religions, for instance, and so on. That is, democracy has to cope now, not more, at least not in the first instance, with the question of the rights of first generation, second generation, that is civil rights, for instance, rights of vote, or social rights, economic rights, for instance, but it has to do now with the problem of group rights. That is, at least in certain countries, it is debated, discussed whether, for instance, some rights has to be considered to groups, in which measure, for instance, which rights and how and in which measure the traditional individual rights are compatible with the new group rights. That is, there is compatibility, there is no compatibility, there are problems, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, this has an influence also on the juridical system. Of course, here the positions are very different from each other. There are the position of those who, for instance, the Canadian professor Will Kumlika says, actually, we have to find, of course, group rights which are compatible with traditional individual rights. Traditional individual rights cannot be touched, cannot be limited, may not be limited, may not be, so to speak, may not damage it, may not be suffer from limitation of any sort, of whichever sort. But anyway, it is possible for him, for Will Kumlika, to find group rights which are compatible with traditional individual rights and which are, so to speak, actually not rights which are conceded to the group, but they are rights which are conceded to the individual, insofar as, in as much as the individual is considered no longer only as regards his economic aspects or civil aspects, but also as regards his being an historical entity, that is, an entity which has determined traditions, for instance, the language. First form of tradition of culture is the language, of course, traditions, customs, and habits. This is, of course, so to speak, simpler for a Canadian like Will Kumlika, because Kumlika has born and has lived in a country like Canada, where there are two great cultural and language groups, French and English. And therefore, he has, so to speak, the habit, and he was compelled, and Canada was compelled to face the problems connected to a majority of English people, English-speaking people, and of a strong minority of French-speaking people, how to compenetrate the two, how to ensure that in the public space there are the equal opportunities for everybody, and so on and so forth. Kumlika says that actually, a policy of neutrality between the groups is not a policy of neutrality at all. That is to say, the state, the government should not intervene. The country should abstain from every form of group rights, of concession to group and acknowledgement of group rights in the name of neutrality. Would be no neutrality at all, because if we have different groups in a country, a policy of neutrality is already a policy of not neutrality in favor of the majority, of cultural majority, of the linguistic majority, and so on and so forth. That is, in the modern contemporary state in which we have different cultural groups, the state, the country, the government has to intervene in order to re-equilibrate and to re-equalize the different groups to the advantage of the minorities. It is, so to speak, it is a little bit paradoxical, but neutrality would be no neutrality at all. That is, the state should not be neutral in order to give to all members of the state equal opportunities. And these equal opportunities are stated and asserted and affirmed through and thanks the group rights. It is, for instance, promotion of the language, French language, in protection of French language, protection of French minorities, access to public offices for the French minorities in Canada. But of course, we can find different examples in the different countries in which there are different compositions of population, and of course of different languages, of also different ethnic components. We can adapt these so general discourse in favor of group rights to different countries in which we have not an homogeneous population, but in which we have minorities of every sort and of any kind. So I think that in the present, in contemporary state, a discourse regarding plurality and democracy cannot help discussing this question of group rights, yes or not. Of course, there are those who say no, not at all, because they refuse, for instance, the very idea of a mosaic interpretation of the Constitution. For instance, a theoretical thinker who is against any form of group rights in the sense of concession and acknowledgement of different cultures and distribution of rights on the basis of the belonging of a different culture by the members of the country is Brian Berry, the late Brian Berry. He was against any form of multicultural presupposition in the concession and acknowledgement of rights in a country. He says, no, we have only citizens, rights belong to citizens, not depending this on their belonging to this or this other group. On the contrary, he said, the concession acknowledgement of group rights would damage the equality of the citizens before the law and before the council, before the state. He was, for instance, he admitted as group rights only those which we usually call affirmative actions. That is, if we have in a country a group which, for whichever reason has been damaged economically, is in the condition of being backwards, being not having the same opportunities as other groups in the state, then in this case, for economical grounds alone, we can concede group rights. But these affirmative actions have to be immediately eliminated when we do not have any longer a condition of penalization for different groups. So we have in the contemporary debates, of course, people who say yes to group rights, of course, under the presupposition that the foundation of rights and of democracy are the traditional civil rights, and the group rights are an extension which are directed to the individual in as much as the individual is an historical being with determined tradition, forms of life, habits, customs, and cultural forms, and so on, which of course makes the life of the individual, and therefore the promotion of these rights, of the right connected to the culture of the individual, are, so to speak, an extension of the civil rights, of the traditional civil rights, of the economical rights, because they are connected to the very form of life, the way of life of the individual. This is a position. Quimlica is, I would say, the most known, but is not the only one, leader for these rights. There are those who say no, group rights are something which is a threat for the equality of the state. There are also equality of the citizens, for instance. There are also those who say no, we have for instance, as regards the juridical system, the danger that determinate assumptions are admitted in the system of law, and this, for instance, is the problem of the cultural differences, in which a determined person have received not the same treatment by the laws, since they had as a mitigating circumstances of the belonging to a group. So somebody says no, to admit multiculturalism, either in the system of rights in general or in the system of legal law, would be rather a danger than an opportunity. I would say this is in the moment the position which the question of democracy and pluralism has to cope with and to face with the most frequency, I would say. And so I give now the word to the other people. I think that I have spoken, but of course I can go forward. But I think I doubt whether I should now give the word to the other discussants.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gianluigi. As always, very deep, and you really brought the idea of multiculturalism and the kind of context that you are brought in, means about, Canada and group rights and multiculturalism, and how this coexistence of the two concepts, pluralism and democracy, exists. So DP Roy is not able to join us because of some network issue. So we have 4 or 5 respected friends who can help our discussion. So we have with us Dr. Raghu Kumarji, and then we'll invite Dr. Janal Singh Anand, then Dr. Dhananjay Raiji, and Shri Vijay Sahab is chairing the session, and then we'll invite some of our discussion to question and answer. So now I request Dr. Raghu Kumarji to help us.
Thank you, Randir. Actually, I think I can say one thing. I'm not. I wanted to participate as a simple participant today to hear this subject matter, but I entertained certain ideas for a long time about this democracy. That we have been understanding democracy as a simple a method of elections where majority will be decided within the spectrum of the votes. But over a period of time, several issues have come into the idea of democracy. That it's not just elections and vote that is one part of the democracy. But there are certain areas where democracy has to grow beyond. Time has come because we have become a victim of this understanding of democracy as the ultimate majority through elections. So now there are certain areas like pressure groups which reflect upon the working of the democracy, and we have for a long time, especially since 2 decades, we are talking about the civil societies, their role in democracy. Especially we have one friend here in Hyderabad, Tarnaka, Dr. Chalikani. Many of you will be knowing about him. He has been canvassing on the idea of civil society. He did his PhD, 2 PhDs in France, especially on French constitutional history. And then he has been canvassing about the idea of civil society, how it can influence the democracy. We are also trying to bring out a book of his essays, which he has written over a period of 2 decades on this civil societies. Add some extra element to the idea of democracy, and then the very idea of understanding democracy as a result of secret ballot, and then accepting one person who has gained more number of votes as the people's representative is an area to be again reconsidered. Definitely, I think Lohia was very clear when he was talking about vote spade and jail as the symbols of the modern democracy. That means vote is one thing, and in case of necessity, when the government is bad, the people have the right to disobey the orders of the government to go to jail, and then the spade where the field work goes on. So and post Lohia, we have these ideas of civil societies entering into the dialogue of democracy. So now each residential society in a particular colony, each flat owners association in a colony, or even some smaller groups like the traders, the small traders, all these groups are seeking some kind of role in the local activities. For example, there is one proposal of establishing a government library. After a long time, our locality is about to get a government library. Then what is the library and how to use it is a big question that's going on in our discussion. We say that the library cannot be run in the old model of just having books and tables and chairs. It must have some open space where people come together and discuss. And another idea is one of the, I think it's more than a millennium old idea, where Basava philosopher, has said that he has proposed at one point of time that there must be something called as Anubhava Mandapas. Anubhava Mandapas means a floor where we can exchange our ideas about experiences. So he wanted to have some space in every village, town, where people exchange their experiences either on day-to-day basis or on what's called as a weekly basis. So something like when the Santa, what we call as people come together to sell their items. On the same day, he wanted also to have some kind of discussion to take place among the members, and for that purpose, an open space. So democracy is now the idea of democracy is an expanding area. It's no more the mere idea of political representation. There is a various layers of political representation, political, civil, and other areas of representation, pressure groups. So even representative idea also has to undergo a change. And for that, political scholars like you have to work with a scheme of things which we have to circulate among the people and put it for discussion, because the idea of plurality has to go much deeper into the idea of democracy. It's not just the majority, it's something more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the idea of plurality has to go something deeper than the idea of democracy in a very literal sense of representation democracy. It should be a participatory democracy, and in this way, we can think about the project of citizenship development. Unless we develop citizens, we cannot find a way of inculcating constitutional morality, and so that the actual democracy can be practiced. And in that sense, democracy is not a state, it is a process. It is a continuous process of thinking and working together for the democracy. So thank you so much for deepening the discussion. And now I request Dr. Dhananjay, who is a deep seeker and senior research fellow from CSDS.
Thank you, Randir, for
रहे हैं कि किताबों के बीच में बैठे हुए हैं, तो आपके लिए 10 से जगह 15 मिनट का समय.
There's some disturbance, so I could just yeah, I'll take not more than 4-5 minutes, but These are some of the points which I would like to share, and I concur with the previous comments and arguments. And I think democracy and pluralism are both are very important concepts and important practices. And we can't have democracy without pluralism, and we can't have pluralism without democracy. So there's a quid pro quo between democracy and pluralism. Otherwise, it becomes just an empirical majority, and majority led by empiricism, hardcore empiricism. So democracy and pluralism is important, and I think one of the important factor in the connecting dots between democracy and pluralism is idea of recognition. And recognition is a very important, not in Hegelian sense, but recognition is a very important between self and others. So here, what is happening that in modern democracy, one of the ways to come up with the idea of recognition is empirical decisions. So recognition is linked not in a sense that self is recognizing other and other is recognizing self, but this is an empirical decision. And this is one of the fault lines of modern democracy, when empirical decisions are deciding recognition. And this is, despite all safeguards, the democracy, I mean, most of the democracies turned into utilitarianism. So when we are talking about democracy and pluralism, then unfortunately, what is happening that this idea of recognition becomes the site of empirical decision, and empirical decisions are actually outcome of utilitarianism. And we know the utilitarianism is based on the very powerful argument of majoritarianism. And what is happening in the context of majoritarianism is this, that the crises are decided by empirical majority, and resolutions are also decided by empirical majority. So in this context, we are in a very difficult and very problematic situation. And I think this complexity has further become problematic, or this complexity has been goaded further by the development of new liberalism, or the kind of capitalism we are facing or we seeing in contemporary time. So on the one hand, we have utilitarian-led democracy, where democracy and pluralism are decided by empirical reality and majoritarianism. We have another development is neoliberalism. And what is happening by neoliberalism is that decisions are reduced to non-substantive democratic ethos. So non-democratic, or the idea of experts, become very important to solve democracy and pluralism. And the domain of non-participatory mechanism or expert domains become very important. So utilitarianism and the expert-led decisions have become norm in the present democracy. Pluralism is a very important, and if one has to save democracy, one has to save pluralism, and it has to be done through normative, sensitive, and protective and progressive ways. Normative concern that there should be pluralism, and there has to be recognition. Sensitivity is a very important benchmark in democracy. There can't be democracy without sensitivity, and the protective and the progressive mechanisms are very important part of the pluralism. I think in this context, there are many important people and scholars and philosophies, but Gandhi also becomes very important, because here Gandhi is coming to pluralism and democracy through his idea of decentered decisions. So decentered decisions are become very important for decentralization. And also the concept of being. The concept of being of Gandhi is non-utilitarian and non-empirical, and also not guided by neoliberal self. So Gandhi's person is being, and this being is non-binary. So Gandhi's being is non-binary, and Gandhi being is the biggest asset of Gandhi's being is in non-legal entitlement. I mean, you are not defining being through certain legal mechanism or legal criteria. Being is there. I mean, you don't need any approval from some mechanism that being can be recognized. Gandhi says that being is a very crucial, in which each is not without other. So other and each are very formidable part for deciding democracy and pluralism. This is what I had to say. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Dhananjay Raiji. Very deep, and the way you brought Gandhi is really very invoking, I would say. Now I request Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand. Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand is the author of more than 150 books. He's a poet, and he has a deep quest for participatory democracy, and he always play a significant role like discussion and dissent for the democracy. So, Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand, over to you.
Thank you so much, Randhirji. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It is my privilege to address high intellectuals who are meeting here on a topic which is, I can say, the most burning topic these days. We are talking of pluralism and Indian democracy. So India is a pluralistic society, and we have been having a democratic system of government. It was adopted because it was considered the best in Indian conditions. But as of late, we are now carrying only the phantom of democracy. We often say a phrase in letter and spirit. And I can definitely say we have democracy in letter, whereas the spirit has been hounded out. What we see today is a travesty of the democratic institutions. And we see there is an erosion all around. When we are saying all these things, perhaps everybody says this is happening, that is happening, but we are not going into why these things are happening. I think as intellectuals, it is our duty to go into the why of these things. As a teacher and a scholar, I believe that the fall in political institutions, the way our democracy has fallen, the reason lies in how we have been teaching our students. We have, in the times of Plato and Aristotle, there were mainly three subjects which were taught. One was poetry, there was history, and there was public speaking. Now, if we see, look at our syllabus, everything is missing. Philosophy is missing, poetry is missing, literature is missing, and history is there now because history is very obstinate and it shamelessly repeats itself. So history is there, we cannot escape it. And so far as public speaking is concerned, it leads to the qualities of leadership. And if I go back to Plato, he wanted that the leader should have vision. Now you can compare very easily our present leaders with these requirements. He should have vision. He should have a sense of reality, realism, and he should be a teacher. Now, friends, now take any leader of modern India. I don't talk of BJP, I don't talk of Congress, I don't talk of any other party. Let me see any one person who is measurable to these three basic qualities. He was talking of a philosopher king, and we found these qualities in Atal Bihari Vajpayee, we found these qualities in Jawaharlal Nehru, all those people before 1950. who were deep rooted in the philosophical tradition, who were taught philosophy, who were taught history, who were taught poetry and literature. And after that, we cut short that, lifeline. Literature was cut out. You look at, I can quote that there are universities where literature is not at all taught. This is a shame on education system. And what we want from these people, political leaders want corruption. They want a society which believes in corruption, and we are creating conditions in which people start believing in corruption. Now everybody says, how can we stem this tide? We cannot stem this tide unless we change our priorities, unless we change our systems. We have to rethink if we want to give a U-turn to our system. We are falling into the ocean of future unprepared. We don't have anything to carry. And I believe that now I come back to, from philosophy, I would come back to the what is actually happening here. Now just see I give one example. The people elect one person and send him to the legislature. Now my question is, to whom that person is loyal? Is he loyal to the people who have elected him, or he is loyal to the party leader who fielded him? This is a very big question. His loyalty is with the teacher, with his leader. And then second part is within intra-party, within the party, how much democracy is there? Now go to any party. Whenever there is any question or any debate, the members simply say, we leave the decision to the party leader. Now, what are you here for? What have you been elected for? Not to give your opinion? Absolute nonsense of democratic system. So friends, we are living in a society in which we have a democracy which is a shadow democracy, and political leaders enjoy benefits. The reason is simple, that we have an illiterate electorate. We do not want them to be educated, and our education is such that we are producing job seekers. Every child who grows up, he wants a job and he wants a comfort zone. We don't want to work. We don't want to create something. Tell me how many people have made inventions in India? Because we were made for, we are grown up for, we are educated for two things. One is service, the other is marriage. That's all. Don't expect anything from our youth. We waste our youth. And you see, I won't digress into other issues. I would get back to the idea of the democratic system. I wish that we have the idea of democracy has outlived, in my opinion. There are, ideas and ideologies which have to be changed after some time. We have developed immunity. When you develop immunity from a medicine, you have to change it. Look how democracy has been destroyed by and by. It cannot be restricted now. I have serious doubts about it. And I believe that we need some alternative system. And it is not that it is autocracy, this and that. What are our intellectuals for? We are simply getting together to discuss the carcass of democracy. We don't come up with alternatives. I suggest that today the democratic system has been reduced to a confrontationist system. There is a government, there are treasury benches, and then there are opposition members. Now tell me, why opposition? If a government is doing something good, are those people to pull their legs? This idea of opposition, I think it has been brought to its very downward lowest levels. The opposition is not like this. If the man in the government is doing something, he is to be opposed tooth and nail. If this is opposition, I think we are not working up to the ideals of democracy. And my idea is that we should have an alternative system, and that is democracy or government by consensus. By consensus. Now just imagine, we elect 500 people, out of which 300 are running the government and 200 are just opposing it. Why we don't allow them also to do some positive work? Is opposing a affirmative job or positive job? We need to look into these things. Moreover, a government should implement the policy of the nation. And what is the nation? If a party has won, it does not become the nation. Moreover, all the parties, whom we call opposition parties, whom we call plurality, they have an existence. We cannot deny it. All these people should be together, their leaders should be together, and they should form a politburo. They should decide the policy of the government. They should decide the education policy. They should decide the foreign policy, and the government is there only to implement that.
Thank you.
So these were some of my ideas in this framework. I cannot discuss more. These can be taken up later on. They need full time. I wish, dear scholars, please give a moment, a thought that this democracy can it be revived? If it can be revived, all right. But even then, we need some things to do something serious so that it is not miscarried. Thanks, dear.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jannal, for raising your concern. And we had a whole legacy of non-party movement in India, like Gandhi, Vinoba Bhave, Jayaprakash Narayan, who never, in the way developed participated in parliament debate and discussion, but deepening democracy, making representative democracy in a very transformative sense of participatory democracy. But you have raised very serious and thought-provoking issues, I would say. Now I request Professor Vikas Upadhyay from Bhagalpur to share some of his reflections on the topic.
Yes. May I audible?
Ji.
May I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. So kind of you. That I was listening from the very beginning to the learned scholars on the topic democracy and pluralism. First of all, I must clarify that I am from Bihar University, Muzaffarpur, not from the Bhagalpur, Mr. Gautam.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So kind of you. That topic is very nice that you people have selected. Very nice topic you have selected and very burning one. And recently I was in the GSDS, Professor Gautam, you might be remembering.
Yes.
The days. And democracy and pluralism is a very nice one for in the context of recent Indian persons. Now, I want to highlight some 2 to 3 things regarding pluralism and democracy. Our previous speaker, particularly Raghu Kumar ji and Mr. Dhananjay ji of CSDS, was very nice on their representation. And particularly, Dhananjay was very much hammering on majoritarianism and utilitarianism. Very nice, very nice. But I want to say something regarding this pluralism in our recent democratic setup. that transparency and democracy is very important these days. If democracy is not transparent, then it is very difficult to go through the pluralism and to maintain the pluralism in our country and the other countries also. And another thing is the liberalism. Liberalization, not liberalization, but liberalism. Liberalism and liberalization is both different, as we know. That liberalization is very not important these days for the pluralism and democracy, because the globalization is globalization which we are facing after 1990s in the democratic setup is very difficult these days to maintain the pluralism in our society, in our countries. When our country is a pluralistic in approach, and without pluralism in our country, particularly in Indian state, it's not to survive our democracy. But it is important that when multiculturalism, equality is important to survive. But these days we are finding that multicultural aspect is not we are finding in our country, because transparency is not very transparency. We are not finding transparency these days in our Indian democratic setup. Friend, Gandhi was very much clear on the decentralization method of decentralization, and he was hankering after Satya Ahimsa, which we know from the very beginning that Gandhi was fully in the favor of the decentralization of the power and the equality among the each and every individual in our country and abroad also. Same as Gandhi, Lohia was in the favor of this pluralism, as we know, and Jayaprakash Narayan, he was the mentor of the total revolution, and in the total revolution he says that sometimes he says that in total revolution partyless democracy is important. He was thinking about the partyless democracy. In partyless democracy also he was speaking about the pluralism. And when the partyless democracy is there, then democracy will be the strongest point for the people who will live in the partyless democracy, and the decentralization will be there, and other things like liberalization, equality, fraternity, everything will be there in the concept of the JP in total revolution. Friends, globalization is also very much damaging our democracy and pluralism these days. When globalization is only for the open market system and for the other system also globalization, but in my opinion particularly, that globalization is not good for the Indian democratic system and for the pluralism also. But for all these things, just I want to conclude my speech. Thank you very much. So kind of you, Mr. Gautam, Professor Gautam. Thank you very much. So kind of you.
Thank you, Vikas, for bringing the perspective of globalization. And yes, you are right. Somehow globalization is also creating a kind of source of exclusion in a state context, nation context, where market is a determining factor and of all things. So it is a kind of contestation between state and it also. And then we can think about the question of democracy in a very deep sense and pluralism. So I request Dr. Gianluigi if he can incorporate some of the concerns, I would say, in 5 to 6 minutes, and then we'll have some question and answer also. Dr. Gianluigi, as he's taking some time,
Yes,
Oh, yes.
excuse me. Well, I am here. Excuse me. I have lost the last words.
You just incorporate some of these discussions concern, as you have something to say. You can take 5 to 6 minutes to
yes.
share your thoughts.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I said one of the problems which I was speaking about is this question regarding the different groups. That is how the problem is, how can we, in my opinion, how can we guarantee this, that social goods, for instance, budget in education, are correctly distributed to the different groups or the different layers of population in our societies? Because societies are, I speak in this moment, rather Western countries than of our planet, of course. But we can see that we have the question of, for instance, different religions, which, for instance, here in Italy, we didn't have before. Of course, this is a richness, is an enrichment of the society. But on the other hand, we have to cope with the question of distributing the budget resources, for instance, to the different groups, so that no group is damaged by this distribution. For instance, this in general, I think that we should find an answer to the question how budget resources are equally distributed, how we can, for instance, promote the preservation of different groups, cultural groups, different traditions, different customs, habits. It is, I think that at least in the Western countries, the main question that we have in this moment is, we see that societies are becoming more and more plural than they were. And this every year, it is not something which, it is something which is increasing very rapidly. And of course, there is a problem of the correct and of the correct answer by the political legislation, by the government. I think I have personally the impression that the countries, or the Western countries, cannot hold the pace with the modification which are happening in our countries. This society is changing more rapidly than the government can also understand. That is, it is a problem not only of action, but the governments have many times not the correct comprehension of the changes which are happening. The risk in this moment, I speak only for Western countries, is that for instance, such phenomena like the creation of parallel societies in which groups are divided from each other without communication with each other. That is, we have had, for instance, this problem in London, in some parts of France, but I would say no countries of the Western Europe is excluded from this. But this phenomena is that we have in the towns, and I am not speaking only of great towns, but also middle towns, parallel societies in which groups are, so to speak, confined to different parts of the towns, urbanistically saying, and between these groups, there is actually no communication. So it is a big problem which interests adults, but not only adults. That is, it involves every age of these groups. And the question is that these phenomena are, in my opinion, increasing in the Western societies. That is, it is of course a defense for democracy, and for the presence of pluralism. I think that sometimes we should not so much speak of multiculturalism in some Western countries, but perhaps of something like a plural monoculturalism, because we do not have an exchange of ideas between the different groups of a country, but we have divided little societies which do not have any contact with each other, and which ignore completely each other, and which also have no particularly desire and wish to communicate with each other. And this, of course, is not so much a problem in peaceful periods, but it can be a very great problem in periods in which social peace is not present in a country. And I would say this is the greatest problem which Western countries, and I mean, especially in this moment, Western Europe countries, have to cope with. This, we have had already some signals in the past of the explosion of violence, also unfortunately in some countries. And I think I have the impression that governments have not the right comprehension of the differences of the societies, for instance, of the 70s and the societies which we have now. So I would say this is, in my opinion, the greatest question for democracy and pluralism in Western countries, Western Europe countries, I would say. That is, that we have a greater and greater becoming risk of parallel societies in which the different groups ignore each other completely, do not want to have anything to do with each other. And of course, this is a problem for democracy too. That is, on close inspection, at the end of the day, this can become a great problem for the maintenance of democracy and for the preservation of democracy in a country. This is what I would like to say in this moment.
Thank you for bringing the Western perspective. I request Miniti Pradhanji to share some of her reflection. Miniti Pradhan is a poet. Risha? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It was nice to, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So it was nice to listen to all the intellectuals and their point of view, as I'm not an expert on democracy and all. Raghu Kumar sir was sharing a very nice thought, the nice ideas of library in the open space. That will actually, you know, it will go beyond the just reading. You can just think and questioning and sharing ideas. That should be the real meaning of library and learning, you know, not just reading something. And but in that sense also, democracy should be open. In open sense, we should take the democracy also. General Singh Anand sir also was talking about the students. Then one thought was, I was reflecting on one thought, you know, whether we are encouraging our next generation to have a pluralistic learning and the acceptance of others. That is very vital for, you know, putting the foundation stone for our next generation and believe them in democracy and pluralism. Just in this, I would like to share one anecdote, small thing. Even educated people, somebody visited my home and they were horrified to see me. I was reading a Quran. I mean, a friend gifted, and you know, like, and I did not find what is so annoying about it. What you were reading, they were asking. Just I wanted to learn. So if, you know, the elders give this type of feedback, don't encourage the children to learn from different religion, different even Gianluigi sir was telling about the social and multiculturalism things. So if we don't encourage to learn and accept, I think in future the democracy is going to be, I mean, it is in danger, and it is going to be in danger in future. And I don't know whether we have time. You were asking for the question. I just want, this is a query, like, no, to explain a little bit. The professor was telling, no, globalization is damaging to democracy and pluralism. To talk little, 2-3 more points on that, if it is possible. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I request Vijay Rao Sahab, who is a Chief of Task Force of Society for Communal Harmony, to give a chair remark. And before, if you have, so there is a direct question from Raghuji. So Raghuji, please share your thought on the query of Nitiji, at least for 1 minute.
I could not make out. I could not make out the question you have raised. Randhirji?
Can you hear me?
Yes. The question was how to inculcate a spirit of pluralism and democracy among the students.
I think my understanding is to allow any number of questions they raise, any number of contradictory questions. First of all, the thing is we have to learn how to accommodate contradictions. We have been trying so far to resolve contradictions. It's not a question of resolving contradictions. It's a question of accommodating contradictions. That's what is the next step in our philosophical journey. All philosophy talks about how to resolve the contradictions and get unity. Unity of thought, unity of mind, unity of spirit, unity of everything. But what I say is allowing all kinds of contradictions to exist and still live together. This is where.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I request Vijay Raoji to share his chair remark.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
you are audible. Yes,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I've been hearing, first I want to thank all the intellectuals who have spoken on a wide range of subjects. I'm not being an intellectual, I'm very fortunate because I don't have to kind of match their skills. But I wanted to bring back certain questions that need to be addressed on this democracy and its pluralism. Democracy by its very nature demands tolerance. It demands common platform or a common agenda. It demands ethics, morals, values, which are totally missing. No system in the world can work without a moral, ethical framework. So I think one of the fundamental things we need to understand is what are the challenges of democracy? Of course, I've talked to you about this morals, ethics, etc. The other biggest challenge of democracy, in my view, is how do we elect our leaders who would set examples like Gandhiji, like Nehruji, who are not only accountable, but also accessible for a democracy to function well. They also need the democracy, especially in India. India is characterized by inequity. There's a huge difference between the 1%, which controls almost like 80% or 90% of the, 85% of the wealth, and the remaining who control only 25% of the wealth. In such a challenging environment, not only leadership, which I've talked about, one of the biggest challenges, how does the democratic country manage aspirations that people like us have, wanting to be equal to America, the international ones, and at the same time, the mundane demands of the poor people? And how do you make that compromise where both islands of excellences can be created? So this is one of the biggest challenges of managing varied and a wide canvas of different languages, different cultures, different religions, different aspirations. This is what the challenges of democracy is. Now, there are a number of models, structures that I can think of. One is, of course, the French model, where the party is elected and then the leader of the party becomes the prime minister or the president or whoever is controlling the market. That system has its own fallacies. What happens is that one or two who control the party, they just elect on a certain platform of ideology, and then they anyway get to the top. So that is not a great system. The second system is the American system of president, where the whole mass is supporting one man who would be their CEO. But that is also not without flaws in a democratic framework. There is so much of, it's almost like equal to a dictatorship with, of course, a few limits, better than dictatorship, as China faces and others face. So the American system has not proved to be a great system, and there are a lot of flaws and a lot of drawbacks. And even today, according to the Oxfam report, 1% of the US population controls 95% of the wealth, and 52% of the population, in real terms, their wages have gone down. So that's not going to deliver in a country like India, where we have this plurality that we have. So Indian system is a good system, but the problem is the challenge of pluralism is the individual. Like Gandhiji said, any policy should be made keeping the mind of the last person in mind. Now that and decentralization and all the rest of it is easy to talk. It's challenging to implement because there's a lack of ethics, lack of education, lack of communication, lack of a whole host of things. So the challenge we have is, do we go in for individualism or do we go in for majoritarianism? How does a democracy become relevant to a varied group? How do we find the greatest common mosaic? And how do we build tolerance among people so that unless there's a harmonious relationship in a society, no country in the world can develop. So these are some of the pluralistic things which the society, as somebody had really rightly mentioned, that society is really a reflection. In fact, he said society needs to be there. The civil society has to actively participate in a democracy, not sit on the sidelines that we are sitting in right now. So the last thing I'd like to say is it's aspirational to be a part and compete with the international order. How do we get to build ourselves into be a competitive situation? The majority of the poor, it's easy to talk about and say merit should be given credit. But how? When the poor people don't have basic education in them, when they don't have other things, then how do we get, sorry, hello? Have I, yeah. How do we get the democracy? How do we build in policies like reservations so that we can pull these minorities and these backwards into the mainstream? These are issues which I think you should think about, and should the government intervene? Gandhiji says he hates government intervening in anything. Probably he was right. Probably his economic model was right, because he talked about the fact that we don't have to be up with the Joneses. If we build our villages and build them strong, we will become a strong nation, but it will take time. There's no doubt about it. In a hurry to be, following the Western policies and to be one with the, and to equate ourselves and do everything, we need an Alexa at home. We need all the technologies at home. Why? But anyway, we want those things. In that hurry, have we missed the bus? Because capitalism is clearly shown that the inequity has not been solved even in America. So what are we chasing? These are some of the questions I'd like all of you to think about in the context of democracy and pluralism. Thank you very much, Gautam, for giving me this opportunity to pen some of my ideas. You took me by surprise, but my, speaker was not working. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much for giving a kind of meditative question to thinking towards it. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your very insightful thought as a chair of session. So on behalf of GSDS Forum, we are very grateful for your kind participation in today's discussion on democracy and pluralism, particularly Raghu Kumarji, Dr. Dhananjay Ji, Professor Gianluigi, Mniti Pradhanji, Professor Upadhyay, Dr. Janel Singh Anand, and all friends who participated, and our viewers both on Facebook platform and Zoom platform. We'll invite DP Roy any other day. Of course, we used in a very good manner of his time with all of your kind participation. And so we'll invite you in our future coming dialogue. We organize every Friday dialogue discussion, and we look forward for your kind participation and engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.